All right, let's get underway. I have brochures for the trip, but I don't have enough that if word began to spread and people just wanted to be looking, I didn't have enough. So I think it would be better if you are interested in going on the trip. You don't have to commit, but just if you're really interested in taking a look, you call my secretary tomorrow. And she will get one out to you right away. We had 23 persons who had already asked specifically if they could have brochures, and so we mailed those out as soon as I had the brochure. and she will be glad to send you one, and probably, you can mail it Monday and have it in your hand Tuesday. The price is what I had told you before. Lisa reminded me that there are always some folks that want to put theirs on a charge card so that you get mileage and so on. Somebody has to pay for that mileage, of course, and Lisa doesn't want to be the one. So if you put it on credit card, it's an extra $125. This is a cash price, and that doesn't mean $100 bills. You can use checks, just not credit cards. Okay, credit cards. Or more, $125 more if you want to put it on your credit card, because that's what it actually costs, and that's the value you probably get on your mileage or whatever you're trying to accumulate. This is a cash price. The deposit is $500, and then the balance is due 90 days before we go, so that would not be until November. And all the paperwork and the money stuff would be through Lisa Whited at World Travel, not through me. It goes to World Travel and to Lisa Whited. Any general questions that I might could answer for you? Yes, sir.
She does reserve the right to raise the price. That's not a locked-in. It depends on the economy.
No, that's supposed to be a locked-in price. There's not supposed to be any changes at all. It says airfares are subject to change. Continental. She does have that disclaimer, but they have agreed at this point to hold 30 seats at this price. Yeah. And that if people will wait till the last minute and then try to get in, the airfare portion might change. The hotels, the bus, the driver, the guide, and so on, all that's locked in. Prices are locked in. Food, everything there is locked in. Fluctuations in the American dollar and so on should not affect this at all. Not at all. So anyway, here's the plan. I'm telling you today, I know a few people beyond our class have heard about the trip, but I've not made any public announcements about that. So I'll give you, first shot. And then if we don't have enough from within the class, probably could probably give you a couple of weeks and then announce it to the church and at large, and anybody that wants to sign on. And if we don't have enough, then I'll tell the television audience that if they want to come and go with us, they could do that up to the number that we have. Lisa said that Continental is being more amenable right now, and that she thinks they will give us 40 seats on that, even though it's a small jet to Newark, and then it's a much bigger one from Newark on to Tel Aviv. I'm really looking forward to that part of it. When we went, we've been 5 times, Gail and I, and it didn't matter which airline you went with, they always wanted to stop in their home city. So if you went Swiss Air, which was a wonderful airline that many years ago, you had to stop in Zurich. If you went Lufthansa, you're going to stop in Frankfurt. If you went, Air France, you're going to stop in Paris. If you went British, you're going to stop in London. And when you have not slept all night long and then to, stagger around an airport for 4 or 5 hours waiting for your next flight, well, now Americans, our airlines, not just American, but Continental, Delta, fly nonstop from the United States to Tel Aviv. So you don't have to stop in Europe, and that'll be a big help, that you don't have to, walk around when you've had no sleep for 4 or 5 hours in an airport in Europe. It'll be nonstop from Newark to Tel Aviv, and the same, of course, coming back. Okay. Again, if you missed the last 2 or 3 weeks, enough of you kept saying, will you take us to Israel? Will you take us to Israel? So by the time we get to next February, Gail and I will not have been in 14 years. We did go 5 times, but we haven't been in 14 years. After my father was so ill, shortly after the last trip, and subsequently died about 18 months later, we haven't traveled with any group since that time. None. So this is a venture because some of you asked if I would do this, and so we are going to do it. This will probably be the last trip I make to Israel. There are other places Gail and I want to go the rest of our lives. This is probably it for me. So I've put this together as best I know how with Lisa Whited and World Travel here in Tulsa. Again, anything that's mentioned in the brochure that requires an entry fee, it's included. 3 meals a day are included. There's one little phrase, I think, that they used in there about, and some lunches on the road or something. The only reason it was worded that way, and I caught it, but it had already gone to the print, it simply means some days you may eat lunch at the hotel where you're staying. It'll be convenient to go back and eat at the hotel. Otherwise, you will have lunch on the road. I mean, at a restaurant en route. But all meals are included. All meals are included. So the only money you should really need is for snacks. If we stop at, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, you want ice cream or a candy bar or something. American money is good. You don't have to change your money. They're glad to have American money. If you want to buy something more, something made out of olive wood or whatever, they'll take your credit cards in a heartbeat. So there's no problem with that. Okay. That should be a total price to you. We feel, that we've done the best we can to get you a good firm price. In the brochure, let me simply say, too, that when we went the first time, we discovered that some of the people who put these tours together don't know what a pilgrimage really should be like, as I see it anyway. They took us straight to Jerusalem, and even the first, you get there and you're jet-lagged and feeling lousy, and they took us straight into Jerusalem that first night. And no, that's all backward. So we've never done that since. We're going to fly into Tel Aviv, which is right near the Mediterranean. Hotel will be right near the beach there. And we'll have the first night there. So you don't have to go anywhere, do anything. We'll have dinner and bedtime the first night. Then we will go up the coast. And we'll stop. One of the first significant places will be Caesarea. And that's where Pontius Pilate lived, the governor, and others before and after him. But, of course, because he was the governor when Jesus was tried and crucified, we associate it with Pontius Pilate. We'll go to Caesarea. And then on up the coast, there is an old Crusader fortress. And that may not be of as much interest to you because it's only 1,200 years old. But nonetheless, there's a Crusader fortress up at Acre, and then go inland just a little way to Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel is right on the coast, and it's where Elijah fought the prophets of Baal, cut off their heads, and the blood ran down into the Jezreel River. Jezreel. And so that river actually flows this way, not toward the sea. Flows that way. It's a beautiful, fertile area. From the top of Mount Carmel, you can see it. But that same day, everything's close here, 50 miles from the river to the sea. We will go all the way over to Tiberias, which sits right on the banks of the lake here. And it's a sister city to Tulsa. So we will be in Tiberias the second night, and the third and the fourth. 3 nights here. So from here on Tiberias, we will see a lot of points of interest. That first day, we will see Sepphoris. Sepphoris is not mentioned in the Bible because it was a Greek city, but it was much larger than Nazareth. And they have found ruins there of mosaics 2,000 years old and so on that have been unearthed. Scholars believe, our best scholars believe, that Jesus and his Father could not find sufficient work in a village of Nazareth. Today, Nazareth's about 75,000 people. So we'll remind you, don't be confused. This is not what Nazareth looked like when Jesus lived. Nazareth was a little tiny place. a little tiny place. And that work for probably not a carpenter who worked a lot with wood because there aren't many trees, probably scholars believe a stonemason who trimmed and built things out of stone. That's not terribly important, but the point is we will see Sepphoris, the ruins. It's no longer a city. The ruins at Sepphoris, and spend the night, have dinner, and spend the night, breakfast the next morning, and then we will go to Nazareth, and you will see the modern city. But we also have scheduled something that we've not seen before, and that is in the last 14 years they have unearthed this tiny little village right nearby that they believe is much more indicative of what Jesus lived in, grew up in, worked from, to go to Sepphoris. So we'll see that, which we've not seen before. One of the most significant places to me, one of my favorite places, is Caesarea Philippi, where the Jordan River begins with the beautiful springs and flows southward down to the lake, and where Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do people say I am?" And Simon, "You're the Messiah of God." So it's a very special place, I think, very special spot. So we'll come back, and then we have a day also from Tiberias where we will go to the beautiful church where we believe he did the Sermon on the Mount from that location. The church wasn't there. I'm not implying that church is original. You'll see Capernaum, which sits right at the 12 o'clock position on the lake. And it has some of the most meaningful ruins, I think, in the area. The Roman Catholics have done a great job of buying and then excavating with very good help Capernaum. They had done a lot of work each time we've been back. And one year, some of you were with us when Charlton Heston was there. He was doing his recordings of the Bible, reading the Bible, and we were told, well, you have to stay back just a few moments. The camera crew, what camera crew? Well, Charlton Heston is here, and we actually got to see him walk by, and so on. Anyway, Capernaum's right here, and the synagogue. Now, the columns have been raised again, not the roof and everything, but you can get a good feel for that. And they believe, the Roman Catholics believe, they have found the house of Simon Peter. And the best scholars think they're right about that. There's also a boat, remains of a boat here that's included a few years ago. I want to say, since we went the first time, which was in 83, so in the last 20 years or so, they had an unusually dry year, and the lake went down considerably, and lo and behold, here were the ruins of a boat that they carbon dated back to the time of Jesus. It doesn't necessarily mean he was in that one, but it's a boat of the period, showing you the kind of boats that did ply their way across. You will have a boat ride on the lake, so you get a feel for what that's like to be out on the lake. And if you want to eat St. Peter's fish, it's what they're called. They're a lot like an Oklahoma crappie to me, about the same size, and taste very much like what I think of as a crappie. But you don't have to have fish. First time we went, our Jason, that was in 83, and he hadn't had his birthday yet. He was 12. And we sat down to eat St. Peter's fish. And he had never had a fish served to him, head and all. And we had made this clear to our boys. Now, we're traveling with a group, and when you travel with a group, you have to get along. Everybody gets along. Nobody complains, you know. So they were doing fine. He and Trey both were doing fine. And we glanced over, and Jason had taken his napkin and carefully lined it out so that it was over the fish's head. And he was eating the back part. As long as he didn't have to look in its eye, he was all right. Okay. So if you want to eat St. Peter's fish, that'll be a part of one of the choices on the menu. Will be St. Peter's fish there. And so we will see this area around Capernaum, Bethsaida, strangely enough, this beautiful church where they believe the Sermon on the Mount was preached was built by Mussolini. Mussolini, when he was dictator, built it for the Catholic Church back before World War II. But ignoring the Donau, it still is a beautiful place. And then we will go south. You'll get a look at the Jordan River close up, and we'll go south after 3 nights here. And I think those are very significant nights up at the Sea of Galilee, because that body of water hasn't changed. I mean, its outline, its shape, what you see there, I've always felt this is the real thing here. It's nothing like what I expected to see. I guess I thought of, we had not been in Oklahoma very long at that point, and so lakes that I knew in Texas always had a lot of trees around them. And of course, this is not a country with lots of trees. So the lake doesn't have a lot of trees the way I was expecting. You come up over a rise and there's a lake. It was an unusual experience for me. Anyway, we'll see the Jordan River, and then we'll go south. And one of the most significant ruins, I think, is Bet Shean. They had been doing more and more work to it each time we saw it, and now we haven't seen it in 14 years. So I'm looking forward to that. It's about here, where Saul and his sons, King Saul, that we're going to be reading about this morning, were killed. And they were killed, and their bodies nailed to the wall at Bet Shean. And it was still a viable place when the Romans controlled the territory. And the Romans brought marble columns. Marble is not native here. Brought marble columns and built this main street of Bet Shean, which they called the Cardia, the heart of the city. And those columns, this is prone to earthquake activity. You haven't had bad earthquakes here in several centuries, but this is a fault line. This is a fault line, and you have the African plate and the Asian plate and the European plate and so on. So this is why it's so far below sea level, the whole Jordan River Valley. And an earthquake destroyed Bet Shean, and after the Roman period, and people were frightened ever to live there again. So it was abandoned, and the blowing sands finally covered it over, and grass grew on top of it. And it was excavated only in the last 25 years, and then they've continued to work on it. So Bet Shean is a significant place that goes all the way back to the time of King Saul, 3,000 years ago, but then, of course, has ruins from the Roman period when Jesus lived as well. Okay, then finally on down to Jericho, and if all goes well, we can see Jericho, though it's on the west bank and is controlled today by Palestinians. So they will not take us where they feel there's any danger at all. They have a briefing every morning, guide and driver, from the Israeli tourist service. They do not want tourists ever to be in danger, to be hurt, because it's a primary livelihood for them. But we've been able to go into Jericho before, even after it's been under Palestinian control. So I think that will happen. And so down the river road and to Jericho, and then the winding road up to Jerusalem. And we will spend all the nights after that in Jerusalem at one hotel. So from there we'll go down to Masada on the Dead Sea that Herod the Great had built. And if you're going, I'll recommend that you read about that 3.5 years it took the Romans to get up to Masada after they had destroyed the city of Jerusalem in the year 70 and so on. Because when you get to the top of Masada, you can still see the rings where the Roman campfires were for their troops. There's not much rain down there. It's absolute desert. So what the Romans left there 2,000 years ago is still there. And you can see it from the top of Masada very well. There's a cable car that takes you up unless you want to be really crazy and run up like Jason did one time. He was running cross country for SMU at the time, and he was determined to run to the top of Masada. There's steps all the way. And he had run down before on earlier trips, and that year he ran up and beat the cable car. So he was really excited about that. But then the rest of the time will be in the Jerusalem area, and it spells that out for you. And then we'll fly from Jerusalem to Newark and back to Tulsa. Any general questions? We've really tried hard, having been there 5 times, to be sure we got into the brochure what we think would be of most interest to you. Some people like the biblical places. The the pool of Bezatha, which was mistranslated to Bethesda, and we have hospitals named Bethesda, but Bezatha was the name in Hebrew, where Jesus healed a man who had been lying there by the pool. They've unearthed that pool, and after 2,000 years. One of the most significant things to me in Jerusalem is that they kept digging down. You know that the tendency was to build on top of ruins. And they have unearthed the south steps going up to the Temple Mount that have definitely been dated to 2,000 years ago, and that Jesus and his disciples would have walked up those very steps. So they're still trying hard to find the oldest and most authentic things they can, both about the Israelites and for us Christians about Jesus as well. Right now, it looks like we'll be able to go into Bethlehem. You've seen pictures of the big wall they've put around dividing much of the West Bank from Israel. And that's one of the places where the wall stands. So you have to get off the bus and go through the checkpoint where they scan you and so on to be sure everything's okay. And then you get on to a Palestinian bus and they take you. It's just, another mile or so. It's not far. And you go into Bethlehem, which is it's right up here, under Palestinian control now. But they don't want to hurt tourists either, because they'll take you to a shop. You don't have to buy anything, but they will be sure that you have opportunities if you want to buy some souvenirs. And then you get back to the fence, and you have to get off the bus and go through the checkpoint again, be screened this time by the Israelis, get back on their bus and go back to Jerusalem. So we will do the best we can to help you have a really meaningful and significant time. Since you've asked us to take you, we'll be glad to try to do that. Okay, let's pray. We open our books now, God, and ask you to help us. This book is sometimes easy for us, but sometimes really difficult for us. We're grateful for scholars who spend adult lifetimes helping us understand, and then we pray also for your Holy Spirit to come and help us understand those things that are forever true about you and us. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right, we've just gotten underway in 1 Samuel. We're at chapter 5, is where I marked. Basically, in the last book of Judges, we had Ruth in between, but the book of Judges had left us with several different statements, all saying, at this time there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his or her own eyes. So we're building up to this having a king, and who will be chosen and what will happen once they do, in fact, have a king. So chapter 5 is where we begin today. Their biggest enemy, the best organized enemy at this point, is Philistines. And we're coming up on 1,000 before the Common Era. David will build a new capital city at Jerusalem, and Solomon will complete a temple there, and so on. So we can pinpoint that 1,000 before the Common Era. So we're just before that in what we're going to be reading today. Okay, when the Philistines captured the Ark of God, and the Ark of God, of course, is the box, that beautiful wooden box that held the Ten Commandments. So when the Philistines have been really beating up on the Israelites, they've decided what we need is to bring the box into battle. And if we bring the box, which symbolizes God's presence with us, then surely we'll start winning some of these battles. But all they do is get the box captured by the Philistines. So when the Philistines captured the Ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Now, let me note with you here, Ebenezer, because it may appear in some of the hymns you're choosing for favorite songs to sing in July. Here I raise mine Ebenezer. Ebenezer was a little stack of rocks. When you go down the road here from Jericho to Masada, where there are no trees, none, you will see rocks stacked up along the way. I mean, lots of them. There may be 4 or 5 little rocks, or maybe 10 little rocks. And that means this is a significant place to somebody. This is a significant place to somebody. Now, this pile of rocks you're looking at may have been there 1,800 years, 1,600 years, 1,200 years. I mean, there's no way of knowing. But there's not enough weather down there to move them around. So once stacked up, they tend to last a long time. So Ebenezer is when you stack up rocks because something significant has happened to you. Okay. There was a place called Ebenezer. Okay, they went to Ashdod, and Ashdod, one of the major cities of the Philistines. Samson was taken, you remember, to one of their cities, and he pushed out the columns, and the building fell down on them, and so on. All right. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of their god, Dagon, and placed it beside Dagon. Now, all of these temples, of course, had some representation of their god. Some image, except for the Jews, of course. They didn't allow images of their god. Their Holy of Holies had no image in it. Just the beautiful box with the 10 Commandments had been there, and now it's gone. Of course, they don't have a temple yet, but they had a tent of the presence, you remember, a tent just outside all the other tents where this beautiful box was kept. All right. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of God. Wow, a miracle has occurred here. They've captured this beautiful box holding the tablets of the 10 Commandments. They've taken it into the temple of Dagon, put it right next to the image of this god. Think something like a big Buddha or whatever. And the next morning when they get there, this big statue has fallen over face first in front of the box. It's prostrate before the box. All right. That's what he's describing here, this storyteller. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord again, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off upon the threshold. Only the trunk was left to him. So it's more dramatic this time. Look at verse 6. The hand of Yahweh, the I am who I am, was heavy upon the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and struck them with tumors, both in Ashdod and in its territory. And when the inhabitants of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the Elohim of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is heavy on us and on our god Dagon. Get this box out of here. That's the point. So verse 8. The latter part of verse 8. So they moved the ark of the God of Israel to Gath, another one of their cities. But after they had brought it to Gath, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic. He struck the inhabitants of the city, both young and old, so the tumors broke out on them. This is some kind of rash, and scholars think when we say tumors, we may think malignant cancer. It may be something like smallpox, or even chicken pox. There were a lot of things they didn't understand. We don't know just what this was that broke out on them, but they're attributing it to the box that's been brought into their city. So they sent the ark of Israel to Ekron. Okay, so it's been to their 3 biggest cities. Ashdod, then to Gath, now to Ekron. They're just moving it from one to the other. Excuse me. When the ark of El came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, why have they brought around to us the ark of the Elohim of Israel to kill us and our people? They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the Elohim of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of El was very heavy there. Those who did not die were stricken with these tumors, these sores, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. So the ark of Yahweh was in the country of the Philistines 7 months, as they moved it from place to place. Then the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God I am who I am? Tell us what we should send with it to its place. Now look at this word diviners. You would see the word diviners. The Israelites had real problems with folks who tried to divine the will of their God with all kinds of special rites and ceremonies. One famous one that was used by a lot of ancient peoples was reading the entrails of animals. Sort of like people that read your palm lines and so on. They read your palm line and you'll live and die and love this one and lose that one and all sorts of stuff. Nonsense. Same, with the diviners of that day. You read the entrails of a young goat and that sort of thing. So the diviners, Israelites had a lot of trouble with in the very first place, and here the Philistines are calling upon their diviners to tell them what they should do. Skip down to verse 8. Take the ark of Yahweh and place it on the cart, pulled by oxen probably, put in a box at its side the figures of gold which you are returning to him as a guilt offering, then send it off, let it go its way. Okay, so they've decided it's not enough just to send the box home. Get it away from us because we're all breaking out with this rash or sores. To appease the people from whom we took it, send a little gold along with it. Skip down to verse 14. So the cart came into the field of Joshua of Bethshemesh. Now this is not the Joshua who led him across the river. Of course, he's died long before. But Joshua was a name that was repeated down through their history. It stopped there. A large stone was there, so they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. You may say, why did they split up the cart? Because wood's hard to find. You'll see when you get there, there's not much wood. It's rocks, desert. So if you got to offer a burnt sacrifice, there's no other wood around. Carve up the cart. So the Levites, now remember Levites. One of the 12 sons of Jacob, named Levi, and from that son came Moses, Aaron, Miriam, and so that tribe was made priests for the other 11. So the Levites were the priests, and when we looked at the scroll of Leviticus, it means things priestly. So that whole scroll is about things that are clean and unclean, ritually, liturgically, and so on. Okay, so the Levites are the only ones who are supposed to handle holy things. I think there's some significance to that. When I went to Trinity Church in Beaumont, they treated their altar with great respect. No one was to touch anything on the altar unless he or she was ordained or a member of the altar guild. People in the altar guild were trained in things holy, how to treat things in a special way that ought to be treated in a special way. So the Levites were they who had been trained to do the proper things with holy things. So they're called, they take down the ark of Yahweh and the box that was beside it, in which were the gold objects, and set them upon the large stone. Then the people of Bethshemesh offered burnt offerings and presented sacrifices on that day to Yahweh. All right, so they've reclaimed their box with the tablets. Let's skip down to chapter 7, verse 3. We're just doing highlights, remember. Then Samuel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to Yahweh with all your heart, and that's what they'd been told to do in the scroll of Deuteronomy, which you and I know hasn't been written yet at the time these people live. But the book of Deuteronomy, remember, contains the Shema. And when you get to one of the hotels in Israel, notice on your the door facing, as you start to unlock your door, there's a little tube there, a little tiny tube about this big, okay? About that big. And inside is a little scroll, and that little scroll has the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, He is one. You must have no other God but this one. You must love this one with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Okay. So, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign Elohim and the Astartes from among you. Remember that the male god of fertility. They had more than one, but the predominant one of the Canaanites was Baal. B-A-A-L, Baal. And his consort was Astarte. She was the primary female, in their stories of the pagans. Among the pagans, those were the two big ones. Direct your heart to the I am who I am. Serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So Israel put away the Baals and the Astartes, and they served the I am who I am only. Except they didn't. All right. I saw a very fine program on television a few months ago that was the work of some of the very best archaeologists in Israel, both Jews and Gentiles, on this program. And they were saying that as they have unearthed a lot of these communities from Bet Shean and back again, as you ride along in the bus, you can see some of these, what they call trapezoidal shapes. Remember trapezoid? Two lines parallel, two non-parallel. So they look like this. Here's the basic structure of the land, and here's something sticking up, and the other sides are like so. And it's an old town that the dust has blown over and covered it, and grass has grown over it. That's the way the wind blows. It gives it that trapezoidal shape. And they just haven't had enough resources yet to dig up all of these places. They have to do as they can. And I told you that a few years ago when they had all these Russian Jews finally freed and they could come to Israel, 50% of them were violin players, and they didn't need that many violinists, so they put them on those trapezoidal shapes and had them start digging under supervision of good archaeologists. What they have discovered, and the Jewish archaeologists agree with this is not just a Gentile discovery, that in villages they have unearthed, they find representations of those gods and goddesses of fertility, Baal and Astartes, all the way to the early 6th century. What happened in the 6th century? They were carted away to Babylon in 586. And as old revivalists used to say, they had a come home to Jesus meeting in Babylon. This time it was a come home to Yahweh meeting in Babylon. If we do not get right with God, we are doomed forever, as the 10 northern tribes had been assimilated into the Assyrian culture and had ceased to exist. If we are not pure in our devotion to the one true God, we too will vanish as a separate people. And after that 586 experience, no more representations of Baal and Astartes in Jewish homes. I think that's interesting. That's what they were saying in that program anyway. And they had, again, people with good credentials, both Jews and Gentiles. Okay, let's look at verse 8 of chapter 7. The people of Israel said to Samuel, "Do not cease to cry out to Yahweh our Elohim for us and pray that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines." Even though he's told them, get rid of all these false gods and God will take care of you, they're still begging. Look at verse 12. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Jashanah and named it Ebenezer. And I just highlighted this because that's one of the hymns that we sing. Here I raise mine Ebenezer. For he said, thus far, Yahweh has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel. The hand of Yahweh was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. Wow, that's wonderful. Stack up the rocks and acknowledge that God was in this place and has blessed you. Chapter 8. Everybody happy so far? All right, chapter 8. But Samuel too became old, and he made his sons judges over Israel. Now, what do we remember happened to his predecessor and his sons? Eli, from all indications, was a good man, and his sons were worthless. Worthless. Worse than worthless. They slept with the women who brought sacrifices. They took the choicest cuts of meat after meat had been sacrificed. They bribed people. They extorted from people. And God let both of them be killed on the same day. Remember? Well, guess what? What goes around comes around. The name of Samuel's firstborn son was Joel. The name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Okay, again, the territory northernmost controlled by them was called Dan, the tribe of Dan, and it went all the way to the southernmost place called Beersheba. And it's really deep desert down there, and we were told when we were there before that young Israelis were offered special incentives, paid more and everything if they would live in Beersheba. And one of our guides we had on one of the trips was named Jacob. And Jacob had a son who agreed with his wife to go live in Beersheba for the opportunities that were there. And Jacob told us that he was already 65 and he could still ride his bicycle all the way to Beersheba and back to see his son. He had a car too. But he chose. And said anytime he went up Masada, he always ran down, see if he still could. He'd run down to see if he still could. He'd been doing it since he was a young man, still doing it in his mid-60s. Yet his sons did not follow in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. They were not good judges. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us like other nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to govern us." Samuel prayed to Yahweh, and Yahweh said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, they have rejected me from being king over them." In other words, this is between them and me, Samuel, and if they want a king, we're about to give them one. Just as they have done to me from the day I brought them up out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other Elohim, so also they are doing to you. Now then, listen to their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. Be sure they know what they're asking for and then give it to them. So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you." Now stop just a second and think with me. The people of Israel had known kings for 400 years in Egypt. The word Pharaoh is just an Egyptian word for king. So it was king after king after king. And now they've been out from under the thumb of the Egyptian king for 200 years, and they've forgotten. They have forgotten. So if you could read this in Hebrew, you would find that Samuel uses one Hebrew word over and over and over in what he's about to tell them, and it's translated best for us as take. Kings take. That's what they do. Maybe not for a while. Sooner or later, they decide it all belongs to them. What did they do across Europe? They talked about the divine right of kings. The divine right, God-given, that kings got to take whatever they wanted. Yep, Samuel was right. So let's look. These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. He will impress them into military service. That's what he's saying. Verse 13. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers, those who are most loyal to him, who follow him around and tell him how wonderful he is. He will take what belongs to you and give it to them. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and his courtiers. He will take your male and female slaves, the best of your cattle and donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take, do you see how many times he's using this expression? He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But Yahweh will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. They said, "No, we are determined to have a king over us so that we also may be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles." When Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Samuel, "Listen to their voice, set a king over them." You've now warned them. You've told them exactly what it's going to be. They still want one. Give it to them. You get the kind of government you deserve. You get the kind of government you deserve. Chapter 9. There was a man of Benjamin, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. Okay, stop and listen to what's going on here. He's looking for a king now. They want one. God says, tell them what kings do. If the answer is the same, give them one. So Samuel's looking. And he goes to the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, 12 tribes. Goes to the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, what do I remember about Benjamin? Second son of Rachel, favored wife. Out of 12 sons, she bore only 2, Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin. She died giving birth to Benjamin and was buried at a little nowhere place called the House of Bread, Bethlehem. In New Testament times, Bethlehem was just 5 miles from the old walled portion of the city. Of course, it still is, except now Jerusalem is so much bigger than the old walled portion. People still live inside the wall. They still do business inside the wall. But most of the city is outside the wall. When Phillips Brooks was there, having had a breakdown, being pastor so young at the biggest church in Boston, his church said, "Please take a year off and regain your health." Christmas Eve, you remember, he rode on a horse from the old wall portion of the city out to Bethlehem, 5 miles on a horse. And as he approached Bethlehem, the words came to him, "O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie." Okay? All right. A Benjaminite, and that tribe went back. The part of the land they wanted when Joshua led them across was where their mother died. Bethlehem, in the land of Ephrathah. Okay, so Samuel goes to descendants of favored son, a favored wife, and finds a guy who's really wealthy, and guess what? He's tall and good looking. I read an article just the other day that says, still in the United States of America, how many more doors open for you if you're tall and good looking? People still observe. In political races, put your money on the taller one most of the time. On the taller one and the wealthier one. Okay? Well, that's what Samuel's looking for here. So this fella, whose name may not be familiar to you, had a son whose name was Saul. A good-looking young man. Handsome. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. He stood head and shoulders above everyone else. Tall and good looking. What can go wrong? Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, had strayed. So Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the boys with you and go and look for the donkeys." He passed through the hill country of Ephraim, passed through the land of Shalishah, but they did not find them. They passed through the land of Sha'alim, but they were not there. Then they passed through the land of Benjamin, but they did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to the boy who was with him, "Let's turn back, or my father will stop worrying about the donkeys and worry about us." But he said to him, "There is a man of God in this town. He's a man held in honor. Whatever he says always comes true. Let's go there now. Perhaps he will tell us about the journey on which we should set out." Then Saul replied to the boy, "But if we go, what can we bring the men?" I mean, if we're going to ask a favor that he tell us where the donkeys are, we got to take a present here. Okay. For the bread in our sacks is gone. There's no present to bring to the man of God. What have we? And the boy answered Saul again, "Here I have with me a 1/4 shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God to tell us our way." Formerly in Israel. Now notice this is in parentheses and is another indication that this is all being written down a long time afterward. Okay. As was Judges and these other books. At that time, remember Judges kept saying, there was no king at that time. Okay, so here we have a sentence in the Hebrew text that's a parenthetical because at the time this is being written down, not everybody who reads or hears will understand. So, formerly in Israel, anyone who went to inquire of God would say, "Come, let us go to the seer." For the one who is now called a prophet, okay, at the time this is being written down, this is still explanation. People we now call prophets, we used to call seers. Saul said to the boy, "Good, come, let's go. We got a 1/4 shekel, maybe that'll be enough." So they went to the town where the man of God was. As they went up the hill to the town, they met some girls coming out to draw water. Notice, this is women's work. In that time it was, women drew water. They were taught very young. Men did other things, women drew water. Men meet women at the watering holes. Moses found a wife at the watering hole. Yep. Isaac, who sent a servant, his mother and father sent a servant, go find a wife for Isaac, found her at the watering hole. Remember? That's what women did. Jesus found a woman at the watering hole, asked her for a drink of water. All kind of things happen. Okay, they met some girls coming out to draw water and said to them, "Is the seer here?" They answered, "Yes, there he is just ahead of you. Hurry, he's come just now to the town because the people have a sacrifice today at the shrine. As soon as you enter the town, you will find him before he goes up to the shrine to eat, for the people will not eat until he comes, since he must bless the sacrifice." Remember I told you they didn't burn the animal up. They took the offal, the innards, and burned those up, and the smoke wafted up to God. But basically they had a barbecue and everybody ate. People are there to offer sacrifice, but they're not going to offer and not going to eat till Samuel arrives. Okay, for the people will not eat until he comes, since he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those eat who are invited. Now go up. You will meet him immediately. So they went up to the town. As they were entering the town, they saw Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the shrine. Remember, you build churches, shrines, temples at the top of the hill. At the top of the hill, where everybody can see it. Now, the day before Saul had come, Yahweh had revealed to Samuel. Okay, so the seers, prophets at the time this is being written, the seers get special insights from God. So before Saul ever arrives, Samuel has had a vision of some sort. And in this vision, God told him, "Tomorrow about this time, I will send to you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him." Key words, anoint. It means, it is the Hebrew word Messiah. Messiah, the anointed one. Okay. "You shall anoint him to be ruler over my people Israel. He shall save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I've seen the suffering of my people, because their outcry has come to me." When Samuel saw Saul, tall and good looking, Yahweh told him, "Here is the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who shall rule over my people." Then Saul approached Samuel inside the gate and said, "Tell me, please, where is the house of the seer?" Samuel answered Saul, "I am the seer. Go up before me to the shrine. For today you shall eat with me, and in the morning I will let you go, and will tell you all that's on your mind. As for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, give no further thought to them, for they've been found. And on whom is all Israel's desire fixed, if not on you and on all your ancestral house?" I mean, how much better could this be? You come from the tribe of favored son of favored wife, and your daddy's rich, and you're tall and good looking. How much more could we ask for? But notice what Saul answers. "I'm only a Benjaminite, from the least of the tribes of Israel. My family is the humblest of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin. Why then have you spoken to me in this way?" So Saul begins feeling unworthy, and he makes a pretty good king. And then somebody tells him he's king, and he can take whatever he wants. Okay. Then Samuel took Saul and his servant boy and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, of whom there were about 30. Samuel said to the cook, "Bring the portion I gave you, the one I asked you to put aside." So the cook took up the thigh and what went with it and set them before Saul. Samuel said, "See, what was kept is set before you. Eat, for it's set before you at the appointed time so that you might eat with the guests." So Saul ate with Samuel that day. When they came down from the shrine into the town, a bed was spread for Saul on the roof. It gets very hot there. So sleeping up on the roof where you might get a little breeze from the Mediterranean is the place to be. And he lay down to sleep. At the break of dawn, Samuel called to Saul up on the roof, "Get up, so that I may send you on your way." Saul got up, and both he and Samuel went out into the street. And in chapter 10, he's going to anoint him. All right? We're going to have to put a period there. Next week is Father's Day. All fathers get treated very special next week. Right? Don't rush off if you haven't been to church. Let me remind you that this one Sunday in the year, Dr. Pansera asked if we could not reward the chapel choir for all their hard work by letting them sing at the 11 o'clock service. So this morning the chancel choir sang at 8:30, and the chapel choir will be singing for you at 11. All right? They're looking forward to it.
Nice and level. I do appreciate that.
Virginia, you don't know what a heavy load I carry here, you know.